Everybody loves to put out like a million preseason polls. I've talked about it before. I think it's pointless. I put out how many preseason polls do I do a preseason poll after signing day. So I've already done that one. In the middle of February, you can go back and check it out. I do a second preseason poll after all the spring games are finished. So I'll be doing that one in a couple of weeks. And then I do a third and final preseason poll like in August, literally right before the season starts. Now, the reason I do it that way is because those are three pretty significant time frames, right? After National Signing Day in February, you have a pretty good idea of your incoming freshmen and any that may be able to help you for the current season. After spring practice, should be pretty obvious. You get to see all the teams play. You get to see if a team's got a new quarterback, how does it look? If they've got new offensive coordinators, how does that look? If they've got a new head coach, how does that look? How does the defense look? All that kind of stuff. So that's pretty obvious too. And then in August, the rosters are set. I mean, the deadline to enter the transfer portal is May 1st, right? So you've only got a couple of weeks left for players to decide they want to transfer. And by August, if you're not on a team in August, you're not going to play. I mean, you got to practice and learn the playbook and all that. So, it's right around the time the season's getting ready to start. So I just do 3 preseason polls. And everyone loves to complain, really, about polls in general, but specifically preseason polls. And I get it. They're, oh my God, these polls are terrible. They're wrong. Look at preseason polls compared to the final poll. What do you guys think about preseason odds, though? You can find like odds to win this year's national championship or this coming season's national championship, right? What do you guys think about preseason odds? Do you put more faith in preseason odds than you do preseason polls? Just like with preseason polls, you can find different odds too. I know people that don't gamble on sports or don't know a lot about betting on sports. I don't know if y'all realize or not. There is no official odds. Like, these are the odds for this game. Those are the official odds, and that's it. Or these are the odds for who's going to win the national title, and that's it. Anybody who takes bets, whether it's a sports book at a casino, whether it's an online thing, whether it's your local bookie that you use in town, anyone that takes bets on sports can make whatever odds they want on anything they want. Now, the way odds work in general is the bookmaker. So whether that's Caesar Sportsbook in Vegas or DraftKings on the internet or your local degenerate bookie that you use down the street, if they want to take bets on something, they set an initial odds or an initial line, right? So for national championship odds, which there are national championship odds out, and I'm going to put them up on the screen here in a second, and we'll talk about them. But so if you want to take bets on next year's national championship winner, right, the bookmaker sets an initial line or an initial set of odds. So the bookmaker might say, okay, I'm going to put Alabama at plus 300. Okay, well, if a bunch of people start betting on Alabama at plus 300, that number's going to go lower. It's going to go down to plus 200, then plus 100, right? The lines fluctuate up and down as money comes in on the bets. If a bookmaker sets the odds on Bama at plus 100 and no one is betting on Bama for an extended period of time, they'll up the odds to plus 200 and then plus 300 until they get people to start betting on it. That's how odds work. So if you search national championship playoff odds, you can find dozens of sports books that have odds on the game or the national championship. Now, generally speaking, while the odds might not be the same, exactly the same in one sports book as they are in the other, they're going to be very similar. And the reason is, let's say you think Ohio State's going to win the national championship next year, right? Well, you want to place that bet with the bookmaker that it's giving Ohio State the worst odds because you'll win more money that way. So in other words, if bookmaker A has Ohio State at plus 500 and bookmaker B has Ohio State at plus 400, you want to place that bet with the person that's got it at plus 500. Because if you win, you're going to win more money at plus 500 than you are at plus 400. What those numbers means, the plus 200, plus 300, that's based on a $100 bet. So if you bet $100 on something that pays plus 300 and you win, you get your $100 back plus 300. That's what that means. So if somebody is plus 1,000 and you bet $100 and win, you get your 100 back plus 1,000. That's what the plus 2 and 300 mean. So as bets come in or don't come in, those lines move up and down. And so generally speaking, the lines, no matter where you look, end up being pretty close. And specifically with national championship odds, while one book may have Georgia at plus 400 and another book might have them at plus 350, if that's the second best odds on one site, Georgia's going to be the second best odds on another site too, even if the numbers might be a little off. It might sound confusing with me just talking about it. Let's just put next year's national title odds up on the screen and take a look at them. Okay, this is a site I like to use. This is a good site here because it gives you odds from several of the biggest sports books that you can find on the internet. So if you see across the top here, those are all different sports books where you can place bets on sports. So you can see DraftKings there, FanDuel, BetMGM, Caesar Sportsbook. I'm not promoting any of these particular sites. I'm just saying this is a good website to look at because you can get an idea of how the numbers can vary from one sports book to another. But you can see this is the college football playoff championship odds. So odds to win it all this coming college football season. Not really a big surprise. You see Alabama at the top. That shouldn't surprise you. Alabama is the favorite in every sports book listed here, and everyone I've found looking anywhere else. You can see the odds here range from about plus 190 to about plus 200. So basically, if you bet $100 for Alabama to win the national title next year, and they win the national title, you get your 100 back plus about $200. That's what that means. That's what all these numbers mean. Georgia is second on the list, anywhere from plus 250 to plus 350, depending on which one of these books you look at on the screen there. And Ohio State is third. That's the same. Like I said, you could look up 1,000 different sports books. Almost every single one of them is going to have Alabama as the favorite, followed by Georgia, and then Ohio State. And Clemson is fourth in the majority of them, too. But the odds really start to drop off after Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. Alabama and Ohio State are all somewhere between plus 200 and plus 600. You see on your screen there? They're all somewhere between plus 200 and plus 600. After that, it's a pretty significant drop-off to Clemson in fourth place with the plus 1,200. Now, are national title odds the same as saying one team is better than another team? No. Here's what you need to keep in mind about national title odds. If Clemson was in the SEC, their odds would be even worse than plus 1,200, right? Because it would be considered a tougher road to get there, which is why it's a little surprising to me that Georgia and Alabama are the favorite and the second favorite to win it all next year, because I know that two SEC teams have made it to the playoffs multiple times, and Georgia and Alabama have made it to the playoffs multiple times, but still, more times than not, only one team from any one conference gets in. That's what's happened most of the time. So I'm a little surprised Georgia and Alabama are 1 and 2 with Ohio State third. Ohio State probably, in my opinion anyway, Ohio State has at least as good of a chance to win it all next year as Georgia and Alabama. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that I think Ohio State is definitely better than Georgia and Alabama. You got to remember, we're not betting on which teams we think are better here. You're betting on which team you think is going to win the national title. And Ohio State, I think, has a pretty clear path to the playoff. I don't expect Michigan to be as good next year as they were this year. Penn State will win somewhere between 8 and 10 games like they always do. Michigan State's going to take a step back, and then you have the Big Ten West, which is kind of, a couple of 9 or 10 win teams, and that's it. It seems easier to me for Ohio State to get to the playoffs this year than now either Georgia or Alabama is likely to get there, one of the two, and both could get to the playoffs. It's just odd to me that they have Georgia and Alabama as the favorite and the second favorite because they're in the same conference. But anyway, significant drop-off to Clemson after that at plus 1,200. Texas A&M. So what is this? 3 of the top 5 odds to win it all are SEC teams. And again, you can talk about whatever, ESPN bias or whatever other fake stuff you like to make up. This doesn't have anything to do with ESPN. In fact, odds, to me, are way more legitimate than any poll or ranking that anyone puts out. Because odds, you know the expression, put your money where your mouth is? Odds are based on people who have put their money where their mouth is. These odds are what they are because of the bets that are coming in to win the national championship, right? So Clemson at plus 1,200, Texas A&M plus 2,000, plus 2,500, that range there. Southern Cal, now this is an interesting one here. Out of the Pac-12, you want to talk about Clemson maybe having an easier path than an SEC team. Well, Southern Cal's got an easier path even than Clemson, in my opinion. Now, clearly, Southern Cal, especially defensively, is not going to be anywhere near as good as Clemson this year. In fact, last year was the worst year Southern Cal's had in the last 30 years. So, on one hand, you can say, I don't understand. How is Southern Cal, a team that's been terrible for 15 years, how do they have the sixth best odds to win the national title? That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, well, they got Lincoln Riley and a bunch of brand new offensive talent, and they play in a conference that really doesn't have much talent. Oregon and Utah were the two best teams last year. Oregon's got a brand new coaching staff with a guy that's never been a head coach before, Dan Lanning, so kind of a mystery there. And Utah is on this list, by the way. We'll see Utah in a second. If you think Southern Cal is going to win the national title this year, that's worth putting $100 on. You're going to win somewhere between $2,500 and $3,500. See, this is what I mean by where you place your bet is important, right? If you really think Southern Cal is going to win the national title, why would you bet that at DraftKings? See, if you see DraftKings, the green one here, they have the odds at plus 2,500. That means if you bet $100 on DraftKings for Southern Cal to win the national title, and they win the national title, you're going to get your $100 back plus another 2,500. That's a lot of money. But if you take that same $100 and bet it with BetMGM, the second column, that same $100 is going to win you $3,500. You see that? I mean, that's a big difference. Oklahoma is next on the list. Southern Cal, Oklahoma, and Michigan. The odds are very similar. If we just looked at Southern Cal, you can see Oklahoma and Michigan now. Oklahoma's in the 3,000 to 3,500 range. Michigan is in the 3,000 to 3,800 range. And then there's Utah, like we talked about a second ago, anywhere from plus 4,000 to plus 5,000. So again, if you think Utah's going to win it all, why would you bet that on DraftKings at plus 4,000 when you could bet it at BetMGM or PointsBet at plus 5,000? That's a difference of $1,000 you're going to make on a $100 bet. And by the way, you don't have to bet $100. The odds are just listed in terms of $100 bets. So if you bet $50, you're going to win half the odds, right? So if you bet $50 on Utah at BetMGM, you're going to win $2,500. Notre Dame next after that. Anywhere from, now there's a huge discrepancy here, plus 3,500 at DraftKings, plus 6,600 on BetMGM. Wow. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. If you notice the ones that are in yellow, right, and you look on the top left, it says best odds. Well, that's the best odds in terms of betting on it, right? If you think Notre Dame's going to win it all, 100 will win you 6,600 at BetMGM. It'll only win you 3,500 at DraftKings. So you have to look around before you place your bets. That's especially true for these types of bets in the offseason where they can vary widely from one site to another. Now, during the season, when you're betting on individual games, the odds are almost always identical on every single sports book. It may be a half a point off. So in other words, one book might say Georgia is a 14-point favorite. The other one might say they're a 13.5-point favorite, but it's going to be very close. You're not going to see wild swings during the season betting on games that you're seeing here in the preseason, betting on the national title odds, where one book is plus 3,500 and another book is plus 6,600. Wisconsin out of the Big Ten after that. UFL? I guess that's Florida? What in the world? That don't make no sense at all. Florida ain't going nowhere near no national title game. Oregon, I mean, you're really starting to get into some serious dark horses here. Anything we look at after this point here is going to be considered a huge dark horse. Let's go back up to the top real quick. You know, there's a lot of people, I think, willing to put some money on Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson even, Texas A&M, maybe even. To be honest with you, Southern Cal, that's not a bad bet. They could get hot. I don't think they're going to do it, but that's the point of a long shot, right? Anything past that, maybe you throw Oklahoma and Michigan in the same boat with Southern Cal, but anything past that, your Utahs, your Notre Dames, your Wisconsins, your Floridas, your Oregons, your Oklahoma States, these are huge long shots here. Huge long shots here. Oklahoma State plus 10,000. They were in the Big 12 title game last year. They'll be good again this year. They lost their defensive coordinator, which is not good. Well, one of the best around, too, Jim Knowles. He's at Ohio State now. There's Penn State plus 8,000. Baylor plus 8,000. Texas plus 8,000. Miami plus 8,000. Ole Miss plus 8,000. Michigan State plus 10,000. North Carolina plus 10,000. Iowa 10,000. Lots of 10,000. These are long shots here. Nebraska, Tennessee, Auburn, all at plus 10,000. Pitt plus 15,000. Wake plus 15,000. UCLA. South Carolina plus 15,000. Iowa State 15,000. Look at Cincinnati way down here at 20,000. Boy, you could have made a lot of money last year betting on Cincinnati just to make the playoffs. Which they did. Anyway, you sort of get the idea. Let me know, which ones do y'all drastically disagree with? I mean, which ones are just totally wrong? I know you hate me and you hate Georgia, and I know Georgia's going 0-15 this year because you don't know anything about college football, but which one is just totally wrong? I have a little bit of a hard time with Oklahoma being this high. I don't know. They lost their first string quarterback, their second string quarterback, 2 or 3 of their best offensive weapons in terms of wide receivers and tight ends. Their defense was terrible to start with. I know Brent Venables is a defensive genius, but man, there's just not a lot to work with there. And on top of that, the guy's never been a head coach before. There's a learning curve. I don't know. Oklahoma to me might be the team highest on the list that I don't really think should be that high, maybe. Utah's interesting to me at plus 5,000. Notre Dame. There's going to be a lot of people I bet you there's going to be people that think Notre Dame's too low here. Notre Dame's odds should be better. They have such a tough schedule. I mean, they got to play Ohio State, Clemson, Southern Cal, North Carolina. And without playing a conference championship game, they pretty much have to go undefeated to get in. I don't really see that happening for Notre Dame. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to put up on the screen last offseason's national title odds. And we'll see. Were the odds makers pretty close in terms of who was going to win it all and get into the playoffs? Let's take a look and see. All right, I couldn't find odds from specific sports books like I did for this off-season's odds, but I did find this. This is an average of last season's off-season odds. This is actually from last August, and this is an average of all the sports books' odds last August to win last year's national championship. Alabama had the best odds at plus 260, followed by Clemson at 500, Georgia at 650, Oklahoma at 650, Ohio State at 700. That was their best 5 odds. Well, obviously Alabama and Georgia ended up in the national title game. So they were pretty close on those. Clemson had a down year, finishing with 3 losses. Oklahoma had a down year. And Ohio State almost made it into the playoffs. They lost to Michigan the last game of the regular season, which is what knocked them out, right? Because they had already lost to Oregon earlier in the year. Second loss. They didn't make the Big Ten title game and just missed out on the playoffs. So even Ohio State, they had pretty close. Iowa State. Now, this is a team that a lot of people were high on last offseason, if you remember. So I'm not surprised to see them in the top 10 of the odds to win it all. But, of course, it fell apart for them. Kind of the same for Texas A&M. They did have the big win over Bama, but per usual, they lost 4 games for no reason. Florida, well, you threw money away if you bet on Florida to win the national title last offseason, didn't you? Same with LSU and Texas. Miami and North Carolina. Now, this interests me because North Carolina was in the top 10 of most preseason polls last year. Miami was not. But they had the same odds last season of winning the national title. That's interesting to me. Oregon at plus 5,000. Never really a threat to make the playoffs. Boneheaded losses in the regular season per usual. They lost to Stanford last year. The worst Stanford team in probably 20 years. Not to mention getting blown out by Utah twice. Southern Cal, again, this was too high for last year. Southern Cal, worst season in 30 years. Auburn. Notre Dame was probably a little low. They only had 1 regular season loss. Notre Dame was 1 game away from probably making the playoffs at 12-0. They lost to Cincinnati at home. Cincinnati got in. You know, if Notre Dame wins that game instead of Cincinnati, Notre Dame's in the playoffs at 12-0 and Cincinnati's not with the 1 loss. So Notre Dame's odds were probably a little low compared to how they ended up last season. Utah and Penn State, and that's as far as the list went there. So what do you think? What's more accurate, do you think? Preseason national championship odds or preseason top 25 polls? What's more accurate? I have more faith in odds because, like I said, that's people literally putting their money where their mouth is. You know, these odds are what they are and change and go up and down based on people risking money, you know, betting on them to do it. So I tend to put more faith in that, you know, than somebody that makes a top 25 poll to try to get a reaction from somebody in the off season, you know. Anyway, let me know what you think down below.